Yeah, so let's focus on meetings specifically where a bunch of people or one or two people are coming together. Normally meetings are made because a decision can't be made independently without someone else in the room, or it's too complicated to sort out via email where you can just write up like, this is the approval I need and I just need you to say yes.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Galen Low with the Digital Project Manager. We are a community of digital professionals on a mission to help each other get skilled, get confident, and get connected so that we can deliver projects better. If you want to hear more about that, head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com. Hey everyone, thanks for hanging out with us on the DPM podcast. My guest today is a self-professed project management geek with a soft spot for people management. Armed with a background in psychology and digital art, she leads her teams and her clients with deliberate clarity and efficiency. But she also loves coaching and mentoring others in the dark arts of soft skills. Presently, she is a lead technical project manager at 10up, where she leverages scrum agile methodologies to deliver large-scale digital content management projects. And outside of work, she's in the process of getting her master's in psychology and also writes novels under a top-secret pen name. Today, she's going to be talking to us about meeting strategy and tips on how to navigate complex and politicized stakeholder environments. Folks, please welcome Laura Lussier. Hello, Laura.
Hi, everyone.
Laura, when you and I first connected, you were leading a massive multi-PM project while also starting in on your master's in psychology, and you were also prepping for a talk that was like an organization-wide all-hands event. So I know you describe yourself as an overachiever, but where the heck do you find all this energy?
That's a very good question because I actually also don't drink coffee, so I'm not sure.
So not caffeine.
It's not caffeine. I do actually get at least 7 hours of sleep, though. So for those of you who...
There you go.
Yeah, sleep actually works.
That's a power tip for our listeners, you know, us like the typical project manager working late, not sleeping much. There's your secret. Sleep more. I love that. How about when you're like looking for calm? What's your preferred source of like calmness? Do you meditate? Do you watch like lowbrow TV? What helps you keep your center?
I do meditate quite a bit, so that does help me, but I am also a big gamer, so I tend to do a lot of downtime with gaming. I have played Final Fantasy 14 for the last 7 years, so if you want to know where I am.
I'm amazed that you have time for like that level of gaming. Like, we're not talking Candy Crush here. We're talking like Quest Saga level video games.
No, that was a commitment and I was dragged into it. So
I love that. I think let's dive into it. I'm really eager to talk about this. We're going to be talking about what I characterize as stakeholder politics, meeting strategy, and using a bit of psychology to deepen the relationships and amplify the outcomes of your projects. I know that sounds like an advertisement, but it's really about, you know, managing people and using your soft skills to make sure everyone's collaborating well. It's something that you and I know we could nerd out on this all day, and actually we've done it before. This time we're recording it. So I thought maybe we can just set the scene for our listeners. And maybe you could just tell us a bit about yourself and how you use your unique background in your role as a lead technical project manager.
Yeah, well, I don't know if our listeners have the same thing, but I fell into project management. I didn't actually go study for it or try to get into it. I was a producer for short animated films when I was back in college. That was my profession and my love, but I wandered into tech after that and started project managing mainly website builds, WordPress website builds. And what I love about project management and where my skills kind of come into that is that even though I'm a project manager, I'm also a writer. So I write fiction on the side. I'm actually very interested in people and their stories in general. Like, I just like seeing people grow and kind of figure out why they tick in a way. And so that kind of combination of storytelling, behavioral psychology and project management kind of led into, okay, how do I get these certain people who I can tell there's something going on in the background to listen to me for 5 minutes? How can I get them to believe in the cause that we're trying to do, or the problem we're trying to solve? When a lot of these environments I go into meetings and I realize that people coming into them are very, very stressed, which is not really the best environment for collaboration. And so that's kind of the lens I take to this is, yes, I'm managing a project, but I'm also interested in the people that are there and making sure that those people have what they need to actually give me what I need back in a ideally non-stressful way or less stressful way. Tech will always be stressed. My lead is always stressed, for example, but I try to make sure they at least have what they need and know I have their back.
I really like that. And like it's something that often gets overlooked or else we just don't talk about it enough. We talk about, all these like artifacts that you need for your project, your statement of work and your status report and your RACI chart and all this sort of technical project management, as in the sort of, the craft of project management. But so much of what we do is actually managing people. We've got our teams, we've got our stakeholders, our sponsors, our clients, ourselves. And I love that notion of just having that sort of environment to sort of not be as stressed as we probably are coming in so that we can collaborate. I really like that. And I think it's like a really good tie-in just because, I think there's a lot of technical training available for project managers. You can sort of learn the foundations and the fundamentals of project management as a craft. But, soft skills is a little bit different. And something you've been talking to me about is that you really enjoy mentoring your team members and helping them navigate their work environment. Talk to me about why you think it's so important to have mentors that help you hone your soft skills.
I think, and it's what I don't like is that it is the mentorship route and it's not normally formal training. It's not widely available or encouraged, but I think it's important to have mentors that are willing to teach you soft skills, because I think in our career environment, especially tech, it's assumed if you're working here and you're successful, you already know it. Or if you see someone that is really easy to work with and whatnot, it's kind of written off as ingrained talent. Oh, that person just has it. And you don't really realize some of it might be natural skill. A lot of it is just practice. And a lot of it is behind the scenes work that everyone kind of thinks it's magic. And so it's really important that there are mentors there that are willing to take on soft skills, because I think our environment tends to be you should know this if you're a professional, and that's not entirely true. I could really go off on how many people assume you know how to write an email, and that's not true.
I love that example. It's absolutely true.
Until you find an example of a horrible email that went out to a bunch of people, you're like, no, that is not an ingrained skill. It's just not.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm like, it's probably difficult to craft a course, like a classroom course on soft skills and teach it to 30 people at once. But that notion of sort of having a coach and practicing and sort of, getting advice before, getting some coaching after for each instance of this is kind of how you could sort of build up the craft without just learning the hard way by sending a bunch of horrible emails. And then finally somebody taps you on the shoulder and goes, actually, you know what? Maybe you should do this.
Maybe you shouldn't do that. Or maybe you shouldn't copy everyone. Just a thought.
What's the company-wide alias? Let's use that at 5 a.m. and see how that goes.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I really like that you've sort of taken up the mantle to coach on that, because I think it's really important. And I agree with you. I think it's something that people assume, but it's absolutely something that we're all learning and getting better at all the time and can always improve at.
Yeah.
So in that case, let's get our listeners oriented. So I characterized it earlier as politics. We talk about stakeholder politics, we talk about project politics, and I think a lot of people, when they hear that word, they're immediately going to come up with this picture of backstabbing, cloak and dagger, steel cage match, real adversarial rivalries within a project. Is that what we mean?
No, it's very far from it. And we've talked about this before. I don't like the word politics to kind of describe what we're doing here. It's unfortunately the word that I think people orient to the most to kind of understand what I'm talking about. But really, it's talking about team dynamics. It's talking about understanding motivation of other people. And going off on that a little bit, a lot of the assumption, like you said, cloak and dagger, is like understanding the motivation of someone else may mean face value to someone like, oh, you're trying to figure out the carrot for them, and that the carrot is a bad thing, that I have to bribe them to do this, or I need to do this one thing so that my boss can understand what I'm talking about. And it's not necessarily that, like, people can take it that far, but it's more like instead of a carrot, it's like understanding the context of maybe you have a developer during COVID who is underneath a lot of stress and may not be communicating that properly to you, might be a bit snippy at you. But in that context, you understand and might be able to support versus maybe just face value of like, oh, I need to somehow reduce this person's schedule or some other drastic thing to in order to accommodate. It's more of the nuance of the environment you're working in and the people you're working in, and being able to support that, or in some cases, if someone's kind of barreling into your team, how to block that. Which I've done. I've played Shield quite a few times. Tiny 90-pound me has played Shield quite a few times.
And is that something you kind of see coming? You're like, okay, I see that coming from a few miles away because I'm kind of tuned to it, that somebody's going to come barreling in. I'm going to go and be the shield. Or is it something that just kind of, you see it happening in real time and you're like, okay, I've got to tackle this?
In most situations, I would hope to have been prepared. Knowing, especially if it's a meeting or whatnot, or a personality type, that I'm, as a project manager who's also trying to get the most out of her team, I would be predicting something like that, especially if it's high risk enough. So this is the project manager part of me. The risk of someone barreling through my project, how high is it? Do I need to put effort into it? So ideally, I would be prepared. In some situations, especially when I used to actually manage personnel, that's not always the case, because personnel can be a bit interesting. But I feel like my philosophy about project managers is really to be able to keep the project moving, and really that spirit of unblocking, fostering a good environment for your teams and your clients to work in. And so I'm always kind of looking out for that kind of stuff, especially again, if it's considered high risk of derailing a team, if they even heard about certain things happening. So I've also not said some things because I know it will be distracting.
Oh, I really like that. And actually, that kind of answers my next question, which is, why is it the responsibility of a project manager to manage or influence these sort of people dynamics, these nuances? Why is it important to navigate it? But I think you answered it, which is that it's a risk. It can derail a project. It's something that sort of needs to be mitigated. And to your earlier point, it's these soft skills that are the things that can address it. And no, it might not be in your risk register. Like, stakeholder may come barreling in. Highly likely.
Yes. I mean, I'm tempted.
Right? Like your internal risk register. I think we might all have that, actually. It's like, I can't write this down on paper.
Yeah, I mean,
but the real risk is this.
Yeah, I think project managers who are in tune to people tend to, I think, internalize this, and that's where it comes out as instinct. And people are like marvel as like, oh, how did you know that was going to happen? But with any skill, it's having and seen it a lot of times as well. So I'm like, for me, who learned it on the fly as well, it was seeing train wrecks slowly come or quickly come towards me and being like, yep, that was painful. I'm never doing that again. Or like seeing certain behavioral patterns in psychology of like, okay, that person specifically is pushing out some kind of negative energy that I'm like, this is not going to play well with certain people on my team. So how do I deal with this? Do I just talk to this person one-on-one? Do I actually call a group meeting just because culturally we always do group meetings, even though it's not going to be helpful? Like, sometimes the choice is don't have the group meeting.
I like that. I like that sort of context for a conversation, especially when there's probably going to be some friction, or it's going to lead to sort of this unproductive conversation. And it might mean, and like, as dramatic as, hey, let's cancel the group meeting that was in everybody's calendars for weeks so that I can have this one-to-one meeting with this person, just try and, dig in and sort of remove some of the friction that I see coming. And I also really like that notion of it's experience, right? Like, it's happened before, and we got run over by the plow before, and now we can see it coming. But then coming back to your notion of coaching, I think that's a really important one, where you can sort of be with somebody, mentoring them, and they're telling you about the situation, and you're like, oh, I've seen this before. Here's what I did when it happened to me, and maybe you can not get run over and not have to learn the hard way every time, which I'm a huge fan of.
Not the hard way, still enough for it to stick, but not the catastrophic hard way, right?
Yes, yeah. I really like that framing for sure. All right, let's dig into the juicy stuff. So talk to me about meeting strategy, or just like having a strategy for any key interaction during a project. And I think coming back to this like idea of getting run over, especially in terms of meetings, I think everyone listening has had at least one or two big important meetings go sideways on them. And I've personally had everything from like really awkward foot and mouth moments to like shouting matches between partners. Like things have gone fully sideways. There are certainly less extreme examples where just like obstacles just suddenly appear and it impedes your ability to sort of like get done what you needed to get done or get what you came for. It's just sort of like those meetings that just kind of, sucked.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you touched on it earlier in terms of like being able to sort of prepare, but I think overall, in terms of like project management, philosophically, like why does it matter that a stakeholder meeting or some other big key project interaction, like an important email to an influential person, like why does that matter that it goes well? Apart from like simply not wanting it to be painful for yourself, what is your motivation for having a strategy for some of these key project interactions?
Yeah, so let's focus on meetings specifically where a bunch of people or one or two people are coming together. Normally, meetings are made because a decision can't be made independently without someone else in the room, or it's too complicated to sort out via email where you can just write up, like, this is the approval I need, and I just need you to say yes. Like, usually meetings are meant to work out things or to present concepts to people, in my case, that need to approve things that they may also not be following my project that closely, but they are still the inevitable approvers. So you have a bunch of people kind of meeting together, usually to make some kind of informed decision. So that's why, like, in those situations where most times a meeting is to usually come out with a very specific outcome or a very specific direction, there actually needs to be a meeting strategy behind it. Because if your goal is to get person A to agree with plan C, and you're not prepared to maybe do something with plan A and plan B to make it less appealing, or being able to answer what A and B is and why it's not good, if you're not prepared for that, then you're not actually going to get the outcome that you want. And so I think always at the very minimum, going into a meeting with a very, very firm idea of the outcome that you want, not necessarily like how you get there, but inevitably what is our goal. It could be as simple as we need to just have a decision, not necessarily A, B, or C, but like a definitive decision at the end of this call. And holding that intention helps you kind of corral the meeting in and of itself. Like, I've seen meetings derail because someone was married to option A, when really the broad thing in the meeting was we were stuck and we needed just a decision, whether it was A, B, or C. And instead we honed in on A, and we still didn't have a decision because one person wanted A as the best option. So knowing what you need out of the meeting and making sure you prepare that way is one thing about meetings. The other thing too is knowing the people in the room, because like that's where you get into a specific meeting strategy. Like, who's in the room? Are they corporate vice presidents? Are they end users? What do they care about? Like, that's where some of the psychology comes into play. Like, even if you don't know this person, there has to be a reason this person is invited into this call. And so knowing that is helpful, like knowing if it's everyone same level as you and you can kind of shoot the shit, that's knowing great. or knowing if someone accidentally or on purpose stuck their boss in it, that changes your entire meeting strategy now, because they're
Right.
like, hey, I want you to come in here and look at this with me. And we're all like, no, why do people give other people forwarding privileges? I don't understand. So, knowing who's in the room also helps. And again, sometimes you can't know in depth how this person will react, but at least knowing why they're in the meeting, if they're a decision maker, just understanding that at least helps.
I really like that lens that, like, probably the meeting is happening because it needs a decision or something to move it forwards in some way to get sort of out of ambiguity. And like you said, like, it's not necessarily that, you know, you need a strategy to make sure that the influencer decides on option B, even though they're married to option A. What you need is the right information to A, land with the people in the room so that they understand it, and B, like, have something that moves you forward. And even if that's not, you know, the approach that the creative team wanted that stakeholder to choose, it at least gets it moving forward. But if it doesn't land, if it's not communicated in the right way, if there's people in the room that you don't understand and you don't understand their motivations, it might just be a nothing meeting, and then you might have to have another meeting, and you have this like stasis in your project where it just kind of stagnates unless you are approaching it like in a deliberate way and are like considering the audience in a very strategic way, not to sort of cram an option down their throat, but to just make sure that you are delivering it in a way that they will be able to sort of unpack and understand. And even if they don't love the decision at the end, or even if your team doesn't love the decision at the end, at least it kind of moves forward. I like that lens. We've been talking a lot about preparation, and I wondered if maybe you could sort of talk to us a bit about how you prepare for a meeting, and especially like a meeting that's going to involve a group of like influential stakeholders. Like you mentioned, you know, maybe you find out that somebody's boss is coming. But what does that sort of preparation look like for you?
Okay, the lens of someone's boss coming, because that's very, very different than my other meetings. Um, well, so again, it's really understanding the purpose of that meeting. So normally, like when I'm in a meeting with like a client's boss or just a big stakeholder, they're usually checking our progress, or just wanting to understand, or like there is a very specific thing that we've all as a team and my client have decided, okay, this is actually a bigger decision than everyone in the room can make, we have to escalate it up. So those are kind of the situations where I would be involved with someone that I would consider a high stakeholder. And in those situations specifically, people that are in a position of like a corporate vice president or someone who is an executive do not know your project details at all. Even if you told it to them 2 weeks ago, they're not going to keep that information in their head ever. And so when you're preparing for it, especially if it's to solve a problem versus like the other example I gave where it's just an update of how we're doing, if it's to get them to buy into something when they've been removed from the project for the last 6 months, it's really important that as a team, we're able to frame the information in a way where this person can make a rapid decision. And so a lot of the times when I'm preparing for this type of meeting, I will be actually creating either a deck or a PowerPoint or some kind of consumable that is very easy to walk through. This is where we're at right now. This is the problem we're trying to solve. Here's the relevant information related to it from that executive's lens of like what they care about. And here are our options. Like I never go into this with like, this is the problem and then end it there. I'm like, I'm gonna get fired. I will be like, here are our informed options of this, and this is our recommendation, but these are the things we're not clear of in terms of impact, and this is why we want your opinion on it. And so I really frame it in a sense of like, this is what this person normally would care about. Here's all the relevant background of like why we feel it's not something we need to decide because it has broader impact or higher impact that we don't have good info on. And then we'll do that. And so I do that kind of rapid context setting in the meeting itself when it starts, and we can get more into that later. But before that, I will be prepping with whoever else is involved in this meeting to basically present this problem. And what normally happens with these meetings when I do this, specifically the problem one, is we have this presentation, we do some rapid context setting, and ideally what happens is either this person makes a decision immediately because all the information is there, or they start poking at it of like, we can't make this decision because we don't have this information, we need this information, which is good information to us because I'm like, I didn't know I needed that lens. This is all that I did have. And so our executive is like, you need these other pieces, and then I can make a decision. And either way, we have movement. And so that's normally how I prepare for someone who will basically come in, not decide on, like, need to be able to decide and then come out. I'm fortunate in a way to have some executives who operate that way. I know some are a lot more scatterbrained, to put nicely. And so in those situations, I still wouldn't quite change my approach, but in those situations, I'd be prepared for like trying to bring them back of like, this is specifically the framework we're looking at. We're not looking at XYZ. I'm happy to look at XYZ later, but I need to focus on this first and just understand from your perspective what your thoughts are.
I really like, and the thing that jumps out at me is that, you know, some of us as PMs and some of us have been there where you're like, okay, I need to set the context. I'm not going to assume that they know the context. So that's like sort of tip one. And then I'm not going to use the deck that I used to like brief the team, because it doesn't have the perspective of an executive. You know, they don't want to like talk to someone the other day and they're like, you can show your executive a Gantt chart. They'll be like, that's nice, but you know, where's the money? Or like whatever it is that they care about, right? Where it's actually, you know, you need to look at it from the lens of what's actually important to them and the context that's actually going to create this path for them to sort of get to an informed decision, or at least understand that more information is needed to make that decision. And then the other thing is, you know, tip 3 is like the soft skills to say, okay, maybe you're a little scatterbrained, and I'm going to just help you focus on this one thing. We'll talk about those other things that you want to talk about later on, but this is about, you know, sort of getting to the end of this short path here. And I really like that. And then I guess, I mean, tell me if I'm over-indexing on the psychology bit, but, you know, are you like, yes, like executives care about X and Y, but are you kind of digging a layer deeper, like kind of researching the individual a little bit? I don't mean like creepy stalkerish stuff, but just kind of trying to figure out, you know, maybe they wrote a blog post, you know, last week about this topic. Are you kind of digging into that level of who is my stakeholder here?
It depends if I have that information available. Like, if I'm going in blind to someone I don't know, yes. If they have a LinkedIn profile, or if they have like some kind of written, or if someone else who knows them that's on my team, like let's say my designer actually has more interaction points, I might ask for their opinion and just get a sense of like their communication style. The thing that I would want to find is just how they're consuming information or how they're thinking about information. Because if it's someone who loves in-depth analytical reports, the abbreviated version might actually not work at all. If it's someone who cares about, like, for example, the environment, or like that's the lens of how they want to look at everything, but they haven't spoken that, but it's in their blog post, then it's a lens that I might consider if there's something about my proposal or my work that can tie back into it. So there's a little bit of it. You can't get too much into it because sometimes the information is not available. But like when it's someone you do know, like in previously, like having a client who is very familiar with their boss. And so my client can actually tell me how their boss behaves. I'm like, okay, so this person really cares about this. Or this person really, really likes charts. I don't like charts, but if that's how they think, okay, I'll figure that one out. You know, just I'm not too familiar. I've read about it or heard about it before. There's a couple of ways that you can do those psychology studies, or you fill out a form that says your communication style or how you consume information. It's kind of looking at it from that lens of like, it's not and again, going back to politics, this is not like me sucking up to the boss. This is like me realizing the boss speaks in French and I speak in German. And I'm not going to speak German to the French boss. I'm going to translate it into French. So that's really what's going on.
I like that, the sort of translation process. I think that's exactly the right way to look at it. And sometimes it does feel icky. I don't know, like you're talking about this person in this way, right? Yeah, and extra work. But like, man, I know it saved my bacon a number of times everywhere I've worked, where we just have like this brief conversation, like, oh, I'm going into a meeting, like exactly your point, with the sort of creative director at our client's design team. And our design team goes, oh, here's what you need to know, okay? Like, here's how he or she thinks, and here's some of the like landmines we've stepped on before. And it's not icky. It's just like this communication style that we tried last time didn't work. And this did. So, let's go in with that information so that we can move the ball forward. I really like that.
Yeah. And part of it's also efficiency too. Like the higher up you go, the less time they have. And if you're really wanting to unblock a project from someone that high up, you need to be very, very efficient, because I've seen cycles where we weren't efficient and then it just turns into giant blown up email chains until the next meeting. And it's like, this is not worth anyone's time.
And actually, I've been there. We've been in a project, and we spent 55 minutes of an hour-long meeting setting the context for a C-level. Actually, he was a CEO, and like it went well because he was a very friendly, decisive CEO. But afterwards, our point of contact was like, okay, just tip for next time, like every minute of time with our CEO is like, treat it like gold, please. So like, okay.
So yes. Front load.
Front load. Yeah, exactly.
Front load as much as possible. Yeah.
And which actually like reminds me of something that you touched on earlier. You said, when I'm preparing with my client sometimes. And I think that might be something new for some of our listeners, which is that, we talk a lot about having a strategy. Maybe you work in an agency, or maybe you're working in an in-house digital team, and you're trying to sort of come up with a strategy on your own, maybe in a black box. But it sounds to me like in a lot of cases, you're actually preparing with your client, whether that's like the PM on the client side, or, somebody who is a stakeholder or is involved in sort of rallying and coordinating the other group of stakeholders. But in other words, you're actually preparing with that person. Is that the case?
I've been on both ends. I prefer what you just described, because it's much easier, it's more dynamic, it's a lot more responsibility, honestly, to be trusted to do that. But I've been on both ends where it's been a black box, and it's more, instead of the client, it's the team, your internal team, or maybe the salesperson who last talked to the client, so they've had more points of contact with them, that kind of thing. But yes, in some of the examples I'm giving, it's more either preparing with a client or preparing with an internal team that is going up to their internal team boss. So like this would apply to people like project managers within their own like company, and as a team trying to go talk to their boss about those type of things. Because I've also, again, not always having that lens, there's a benefit to it. But I think it definitely, like when you're in like an in-house PM team for like a private company or whatnot, these type of dynamics definitely apply, because you're doing project management for your company and not like an agency model. And I think in those situations, the office politics are more ingrained and steeped in than ever.
Mm-hmm. And arguably more information is available as well, because like with an agency lens, I'm like, okay, to my client PM, I might say, okay, well, I've never met your boss, what are they like? And that might be the conversation. Whereas I think for in-house teams, like by reputation, some of these, some of members of the senior leadership team and the C-suite, like people have interacted with them enough. Yeah, there's more information available. And actually, it sounds like, I'd be like, okay, well, it's worth it for me to take the time to sort of seek this information out and get, some other perspectives on the right way to approach how to get, this meeting to be a success, whether that's the decision I want or not.
And even if going back to, being prepared, but maybe not having this information, if you're in an agency and going into a client meeting or client stakeholder meeting kind of blind in terms of who this person is, rapidly setting the context is really where this can help. So like maybe you don't know how this person will react, but being prepared with the purpose of the meeting, having an agenda, sending it ahead of time, just in case you send it and they're like, oh, I'm not the person making the decision for this. You need someone else, because that's happened. But going into that meeting and saying, this is what we're talking about, this is what we need to solve up front, helps whoever is in there, even if you don't know them, understand, okay, I can make this decision. I can't. I don't think I have the right information. Like basically in this situation, you're laying out all of your cards front and center very, very early. But then everyone can orient to like, oh, this meeting is about this. Well, I need to be in here. That person needs to not be in here. You don't have enough information. At least you know all of that within the first 5 to 10 minutes, even if you don't know the stakeholder.
And I think that's it's a huge point, because like the thing that's stewing in my head that might be stewing in like our listeners' head is like, wow, I can't spend that much time like preparing for a meeting. Even if it's really important, maybe they've just got a lot on the go and they don't, they're like, where am I going to bill those hours to, for example, or what about this other project that I need to pay attention to? But what I like is that, what you're describing is sort of these layers, right? Where it's like, at bare minimum, have an agenda, bounce it off the person who's going to be, so that somebody can be like, and share it with enough time for people to react to it, so that they can say, oh no, then don't invite this person, or this is not the right person, and then you can avoid having just what I would see as a bit of a catastrophic meeting. Okay, we've got an hour today. What are we talking about? Oh, this. Oh, we're not the right people. Okay, meanwhile, everyone's blocked out an hour of their calendar. Maybe they've known for weeks and have been sort of shuffling things around to make it happen, and nothing will happen. So I think that's like layer one. Layer two, I think, is like having at least a chat with your team to like figure out like the strategy. And I feel like layer three is that sort of collaborative approach where, maybe it is your working method to sit down with your point of contact and go, okay, for this meeting coming up, let's get a strategy together. And taking the time to like build that trust so that you can have conversations like that, so that you can build a strategy together. Because fundamentally, some of our listeners might not agree, but fundamentally, the way it should work is that, okay, I'm a PM on my side, and either you're a PM on your side, or you're a point of contact that is motivated or incented to have this project succeed and go well. So why would we fight? Let's like make it go well. I know a lot of our listeners would be like, my clients aren't like that. They're like, they're my adversaries. They're trying to poke holes all the time. And so maybe it won't work for every project. But I think what's insightful here is that if you can invest the time to like build this relationship with your point of contact, then you can have some of these things go a lot smoother than if you didn't have that trust. And so you mentioned like it is your preference. You won't always have a chance to like build up that relationship, but when you can, I feel like it's sort of added to your success, or like maximize the probability of success for some of these key interactions.
Yeah, and I think to add to that point, two things came to mind. And maybe this will be another podcast we'll talk about, but like the idea of being brief and efficient. I mean, like, I think everyone can still appreciate, even if they don't align with people, to not waste each other's time. And so I feel like there's ways you can get people to agree or collaborate if it's with the intent of like, this is going to save us time, or this is going to make this go a little bit more smoother. And adding to your other comment about layers, like, and PMs traditionally not having time, it's like it depends on the severity. Like if you're trying to just meet with someone who's about the same level as you, or just sort things out, maybe it's okay, you can be less prepared because there's less stakes involved. But the moment someone says they're going to be in front of like an exec, I think you need to stop. Like, even if there's like, we're going to do this, like whoever is driving is like, we're just going to go in blind. I'm like, no, stop, just stop. back them off the ledge just a little bit and say, can you give me more information about this? Because this might be a problem. Like, I would highly encourage, even though it's very uncomfortable, to tell whoever this person is to stop and that we need to prepare, because that's not going to fly.
And I like that approach. Like, it's a risk. And I mean, equally, I suppose, like if you had a stakeholder that was just like maybe not an executive, but just really vocal and really influential within that organization, like equally true to say, okay, hold on, that's a risk, because if that person leaves that meeting with the wrong idea and starts trumpeting about, something that maybe isn't even the case, that could be a huge, that could sort of torpedo your project. And looking at it that way as like needing to have a strategy to make sure that the project is, stays on track.
Proper meeting management is actually risk management.
I like that. I really like that. That's very cool. And actually, so that actually touches on something that you and I have talked about before that I found really interesting, which is that like sometimes the strategy might be having the right people deliver the right message. And the thing that we were talking about is kind of like roles and responsibilities for the meeting. And I thought that was fascinating and like brilliant in a way. And sometimes we do it when we're preparing for pitches for some reason, but then we don't do it for like other meetings for some reason. But I thought it was a really good one.
Yeah, I've seen it in pitches, not anywhere else.
Right? Talk to me about sort of roles and responsibilities and how you sort of define those and communicate that to people who will be attending the meeting.
Yeah, I think it's good with your team, like even let's just say the smallest group is the agency that's dealing with an outside client. Like, it's good within your team to at least understand the reason why your team specifically is in there and what roles they play. So normally, like, for example, you'd have a project manager, a lead in my case of development, maybe a designer, or maybe someone also looking at ads and revenue. Let's just say that's the makeup. And in those situations, like, technically, I could lead all of those conversations if I knew enough of each subject matter, but there's also an optics point of view on this of like, if your lead designer is in there, your lead designer should be, racking up some points of authority with why they're there. And also similarly, like, I think it really is more of an optics lens of like, you're trying to reassure your clients that you have the right team in there, which means you need some opportunities for this team to speak, even though in this case, it might be more efficient if you were the only one in the room talking about everything, but that's not necessarily what your client usually pays your agency for. It's for expertise. And similarly, you don't, as a project manager, even the most versatile project manager does not want to be the final crutch on authority, especially subject matter expert authority. Like, a project manager could proxy because they should know the project well enough to on the fly answer something, but it should be from like your subject matter expert's point of view. And so that we've done things before, for example, where I will know what the answer is, but I'll say, I think I need to check back on that. I think this is what we're doing based off of, some of the things, but let me go talk to my designer about it. We'll confer on it. She'll know what I want to do, and she'll write a response back of like, yes, this is this because of X, Y, Z. And my client will be like, okay. But it shows some, I think, due diligence in research.
And I like that. I like the notion of like what you said. Like, you did know the answer, but also you want it to, like, the value is actually the team. And I think, like, I've been guilty of that before as well, of just kind of being the face of the project to my clients or to my point of contact, and them not appreciating the value that the team is bringing because maybe they've never seen them. And I think a lot of our listeners can relate. They're like, okay, I work at an agency. We're really focused on billable hours. And, if I bring someone to a meeting, I'm going to get grilled about it later because they're going to be like, oh, why did you take so-and-so off of, like, she could have been working on this other project and instead she wasted an hour in this meeting. And just being able to sort of justify that and defend that, especially from the, like, perspective of, Yeah, well, yes, they delivered value. They weren't just sitting there on their hands. We had a strategy. We talked about it, and we really want that voice to be present in the conversation for our client, so that expertise comes through. And I like that's a sound use of time for me, as long as that person does have a role. And then is it as simple as that in a lot of cases where you're like, okay, we're about to go into this meeting. Design questions go to our creative director. Technical questions go to our technical architect. Or is there sometimes more than that?
It depends on the meeting, and we could talk all day about that. But what I usually like doing that works best is I, as the project manager, will usually take the role of facilitator. So instead of just letting awkward silences sit, because I could have like two engineers on the call, for example, and neither one of them knowing which one is supposed to answer, I will actually, as I hear things and understand things and clarify things, I will call out people to answer, just to kind of help drive the conversation. And my role in that usually is of clarification, like that someone says something back to me, it didn't sound that clear. My engineer is back channeling me, being like, what? And I'll clarify it. But then, like, when they're having the discussion at the end of it, also re-clarifying back and then moving on to the next subject. So it really is a me moving things while we have different subject matter expert discussions, and just making sure that the right information is actually flowing back and forth. And depending on why I kind of caveat, it depends on the meeting. Some meetings tend to be really high stakes. Like it might be like the lead designer of the entire company or whatnot, or someone who's highly opinionated. So in those situations, if I have that information, I will usually prep the equivalent on my side of like, this person has this specific axe to grind. Right. Please don't say this. Or if I know if I know my side is opinionated, I'm like, okay, just tone it down a little bit.
Yes,
this is more, knowing your actual team, your internal team as well, and how they tend to respond to things, and like knowing when your team actually responds to stress. So like the reason why I prepare them sometimes is because I don't want them reacting in such a way that says, I was not prepared for this question, so I'm going to do my automatic default reaction, which may not be the best thing. And so at least letting them know, hey, this person might be prickly at you.
And it's about like wanting everyone to succeed and mm-hmm. look their best, and not just your team, but also your clients and even mm-hmm. the influencers or the executives that are in the room as well, because nobody wants to look bad. That's going to sort of make things a bit rocky. Yeah. And everyone wants that meeting to be a success. Like nobody wants it to be a terrible meeting.
Yeah, and I think that's why like I prep our team on our side, because like we are an agency. I've worked in a lot of agency models. We want to make our clients look good. We don't want to poke a hole in them that makes them defensive either. And so when we're suggesting things, we try to I try as much as I can to prepare them for if something is going to backlash. Mm-hmm. If I have that information, it doesn't always happen, but at least, we are in a service agency or, a service model, and we're here to provide solutions, not really bring more conflict. And so if we know something's going to be a little sticky, I at least try to prepare our side so that no one's doing a gut reaction.
Yeah. And that context setting as well. Like I remember going into a meeting and our client had just spent like half the year deciding on a CMS and had finally gotten approval to like invest in Sitecore. And my TA, my technical architect, was going to come and be like, why didn't you choose Drupal? You could have done this on Drupal. I was like, I think we're beyond that point, so maybe just don't say that to them. This is the CMS they're going with, and let's just kind of move on from there. And that was just, and they were cool with that, but it was just their personality, and their sort of knee-jerk reaction to that was to sort of challenge and make sure that they put enough thought into it. But I knew my client was going to be like, excuse me, we just spent like half the year deciding on this and allocating budget, and it took 25 people to do this, and no. So again, just like wanting everyone to look good and wanting everyone to succeed so that people, and I think the thing that you opened with, which is that people often come into a meeting, it's stressful, even just an assembly of people and talking in front of people that you might not know very well. And just to be able to kind of defuse that and create a context and a situation that people feel a little bit more relaxed in. And knowing that, knowing the things that are going to set people off and trying to just level those peaks. And I think when it comes down to dynamics, and I'm an audio person, so when I'm like dynamics, I think of a compressor, right? And you have this like a really loud sound that you need to kind of like just flatten a little bit so that it's not so spiky. And that's kind of like, I'm like, okay, yeah, team dynamics, meeting dynamics, just making sure that it's not a bumpy road so that you can, move your project forward.
And I think you actually hit on a good point about like people being nervous or stressed in meetings and whatnot. And I think this is why like I always set with, this is the problem we're solving. You might not realize this, but I have horrible stage fright. And so
I did not realize this.
And I hate people actually paying attention to me. Absolutely. Like I will go like, I used to sing when I was like a 5-year-old on stage, and like I would be in the background like horribly sick before I went on stage. Oh. But having the meeting focus on the problem diffuses any individual focus on a person. The people coming in, and even with me who's leading, like I'm trying to solve something versus like people are looking directly at me all the time. And I think that helps people be like, okay, they want my opinion on this problem, not necessarily focusing on that I stutter all the time or that I don't want my camera on ever, or,
I mean, and that's like a whole other topic as well. So, P.S. We're making this a series, by the way. But I really like that notion. Like, I like this idea that you have stage fright, and then decided to become a project manager who is like a leader of a project and is generally speaking facilitating these meetings. But I like that tactic of like, like making it about the problem more than about your personality.
That's the only way this really works for me, by the way.
Really, and not even just that, like you were hosting like an all hands event or an organization wide event. So I'm going through this like our conversations in my head, going like, wow, I did not know that about her. And
that one was worse too, because that one was a recorded, like I talk for 5 minutes and I get no feedback because we're not live, and I was like, yeah, this sucks so badly.
That is the worst, right? Like not having an audience. That sort of like studio audience is actually really
helpful. I still have stage fright, so it hasn't gone away.
That is episode 3. For episode 2, so I have this whole pile of questions that I think are going to be so useful about in the room tactics, like what to do, like being fast on your feet and managing things as they come and as they happen in a meeting. But we're going to make that episode 2, and let's we'll do a separate session. But I think like just there's so much value here just in terms of like meeting strategy and that preparation. And I think one thing that really resonated with me is this notion of like layers that we've kind of come across, right? Because I think a lot of folks are going to be like, oh, I would love to be best friends with my point of contact, but I haven't got the time. I've got, 40 other projects on the go. I've got 15 other projects on the go, and I can't invest the time. But there is this sort of bare minimum that you need to do to prepare. And even if that's just an agenda, and that agenda might not even be that formal, maybe it's just like an email. It's like, here's who I think we should invite. Here's the goal of the meeting. I think it should be this long, and we want the outcome to be this. At least something for people to react to and say, oh, well, then we don't need this person, or that decision needs another person.
If you're suspicious as a project manager, I might even call out, like, please make sure the right people are in this invite.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that as a tactic. Yeah, they might not be the person who would think of that either. And just
I've
giving
had people
them that
join
prompt to make sure things go well.
I've had people join meetings just because they were on the invite, and then go in, there's like, oh, I didn't know why I was here. And I'm like, okay.
I
was like, it was on my calendar. I'm like, okay.
And honestly, like,
right.
I'm sometimes that guy. I'm like, okay, actually, I can think of a couple meetings in recent history where I've just kind of shown up and I'm like, I dialed in and I'm like ready to rock, and I'm like, wait a minute, what is this about? Am I now on the like environmental committee? What's happening? Like, So I live and die by my calendar sometimes. But yes, all of these great strategies to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we're being respectful of everyone's time, that we're being efficient, and that we're moving the ball forward. So I think that's really important. We'll swing back to the in the room strategies, tactics, tips, and techniques. But just to maybe round this conversation out, what advice would you give to folks who just want to improve their soft skills when it comes to like people management, when it comes to meeting management, when it comes to things like strategic communications? As somebody who, like, as you mentioned, has stage fright and yet, hosts meetings probably every day, what advice would you give to somebody who just wants to be better at honing those soft skills?
Yeah, so we could talk for days about soft skills in general. I think at the core of this, or at least what's helped with me, is just understanding that in most situations and in most interactions with people, aside from just some very bad apples that I've encountered in the past, most people aren't actually out there to get you, even if they might say something that is miscommunicated or offensive or whatnot. Most people aren't really doing it with a malicious, I want you to get fired or something like that kind of intent. Again, there are some people like that, and I would never, ever go near them, ever. But in most situations, that's not the intention of people, especially in collaborative teams that are trying to get a project together. And so when you're thinking about trying to up your game in people relationship, people management, or team strategic management, it's really trying to see more than what your initial reaction is to someone's response. Like the example I gave earlier of someone kind of stressed because of COVID, everyone kind of understands that, but maybe it's something even more obscure. Like it could be something private going on, or it could be this person just doesn't communicate a certain way. Like I have a lot of people who are visual communicators, need pictures, and as someone who writes like thousands of words, this concept to me is very foreign, that I need to provide pictures. But it's not that they're trying to make my life harder or I'm trying to make their life harder. It's just this is how they communicate best. And I think having an actual curiosity of like how other people outside of yourself work, process information, like receiving information, just understanding and appreciating that everyone's different and that they may just have a certain way that's not like yours, that helps them be more efficient and happy in helping. Like having that lens can help a lot with soft skill management. I think it's just by just that act alone, you're getting more information about someone you work with that you might have had a narrow view of, like, oh, I write all of these tickets and I put all of this text down and they give me one-word responses back. I don't understand what's going on. But realizing that's not actually how they process information and that your giant wall of text is actually overwhelming them, that might suddenly help your communication with this person.
I like that. I love that. Just that awareness alone is like that first step. The awareness of who you are communicating with and how they communicate is that first step to sort of mastering this dark art of soft skills.
It's not a dark art. We're gonna desensitize that. It's not a dark art. Probably like art. Mysterious art right now.
Mysterious art. I like that. The mysterious soft skills, mysterious art of soft skills. Laura, I would love to have you back. I'd love to talk about sort of in-room tactics. I'd love to talk about just the overall like psychology behind, being the face of a project and being a project leader and what that means. We're going to make this a series, but let's cap it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to have you on the show. I always enjoy our chats.
I love doing this. Thank you, everyone.
So what do you guys think? Is having a strategy for meetings and important communications an obvious thing to do, or is it overkill? Tell us a story. What meetings have you had that have just totally gone off the rails? Why? And what was your greatest meeting? What made it go super well? Tell us in the comments below. And if you want to learn more and get ahead in your work, come join our tribe with DPM membership. Head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com/membership to access our experts forum, our mastermind mentorship groups, our library of mini courses, our live mentorship sessions, our Ask Me Anything sessions with a variety of experts, our ebooks, templates, and more. And if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and stay in touch at thedigitalprojectmanager.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.